Sarah Treem, you co-created the series The Affair on Showtime, and it has this, of course, this interesting Rashomon sort of style structure where we see the story from different points of view. I haven't really seen this particular device used in this way throughout a continuing series like this. What inspired you to take this sort of multiple points of view approach to the story?
Um, that was always the idea. That was kind of the I guess writing exercise actually that we started with at the very beginning, was this idea that in any conversation, any interaction that two people are having, any relationship that two people are having, they're never having the same experience. And so I thought it was interesting. I do think it's interesting that people can be in a love affair and a marriage for 80 years, and the story that they would tell about that marriage would be a radically different story from their partners. The weird paradox of being human is that like everything gets filtered through the prism of your own consciousness. I think that's what causes so much hurt feelings and mistrust, and I mean it's everything. But so I guess it just as a writer I thought it would be a really attractive idea for a series, and something that would keep the audience engaged in terms of. I guess I always thought that there was just as much distance between two people in one love affair as there would be in like the Seven Kingdoms of Game of Thrones or something, that there would be just as much space and story and drama if you really, really dove into it with two people. So I don't know. So that's where it started from. That was like the kernel of the idea.
And writing for these two different characters' points of view, I'm wondering, do you feel like there is sort of an objective truth somewhere in the middle, or if it's just gonna, there is nothing but what people
ask that question. Yeah, it's a good question. No is the answer. I don't really think there is such thing as objective truth when it comes to a perspective. I don't think that there is an objective perspective in a situation. There's one person's perspective, there's another. In terms of when we really play around with narrative, in terms of events that happen where one character remembers it and the other doesn't, then we are basically saying, that people remember things given their sort of emotional state at the time. So if one character remembers something and the other character doesn't, did it happen? Did it not? I don't really care, actually. That's not, I mean, I know that's sort of frustrating, but I feel like that's not actually the story we're telling. But I think that that the truth is somewhere in between. The truth is like if you got, this character here, it's somewhere in like the meaning of their two narratives. That's sort of what happens. And then I think that the audience actually brings their own perspective to it as well. The audience member brings their own biases and their own private tragedies and their own desires, and so they become this like third point of the triangle. And that's what I think is really interesting about our show, is that so it feels like everybody's watching a different show sometimes, which was deliberate, that was purposeful. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I think that the truth is sort of somewhere in the meeting between two minds. It's somewhere in the ether, and it kind of bubbles up for a second, and you catch a glimpse of it, and then it's gone.
Having the audience, being like the third point of the triangle, like you said, and bringing their own, perspective to it. Do you get a lot of feedback with people who are entirely on her side or entirely on his side, or think they're both like completely just, out of line or anything like that?
We get a lot of feedback. We get a lot, and it's great. I mean, it's great. And yes, they're, especially in the first season, especially in the beginning, there were a lot of people who were like, his story is clearly the right one because she's in grief and you can't trust her because her memory is so fragile and fractured. And then there were other people, being like, I hate him. It's her who's telling the truth. And we had done her side second for the first couple episodes. So people got sort of used to, like, I think that people thought that the first part was sort of the lie and the second part was the corrective, which was never intended. But yeah, I mean, there's, people identify really strongly with these characters. I think that some element of this situation has touched almost everybody's life. But that's a little bit what I mean in terms of the third perspective, like where you fall down on whose side you believe more. Do you identify with Noah? Do you identify with Allison? Do you identify with Helen or Cole? It has a lot to do with like, where do you come in? You know, what's been your experience? Have you been through an affair yourself? Have you been cheated on yourself? Have your parents divorced? Have they, you know, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, people engage with it on such a personal level, which is really exciting. I mean, that was, you know, we as writers engage with it on a really personal level, and the actors certainly engage with it on a personal level. So it's cool that the audience kind of brings themselves to the mix in the same way.
Coming at it as a writer, even if you don't necessarily think there is such a thing as an objective truth, how do you approach, from a writing perspective, deciding what those differences will be, and for each of the characters and their points of view? Like, do you work from some kind of central template and then sort of deviate from there?
Yes, yeah. So we have a narrative, like a, you know, sort of season arc, what happens in the season. We definitely know that. And we have events, you know, like kind of tentpole events. Like this episode is where this happens, this episode is where this happens, this episode is where this happens. So it's more like the thing will happen, and then we'll try to imagine how it would be interpreted by either party. So, you know, I mean, a good example is in the pilot, you know, the girl chokes on a marble. And that happens. But then the question is, you know, who saved her? And a lot of the way we broke that had to do with, you know, well, actually that was the pilot, so it was just me and Hagai, but it was sort of about the character psychology, you know, and the initial instinct I think that everybody had, and the kind of notes that we got in the beginning were like, well, he should remember her saving the child, and she should remember him saving the child. And so it's sort of like a meet cute or something, you know, it's a romantic and that's why they fell in love. That's sort of the idea that everybody had. But my thought was, well, no, because I think that actually there's a tremendous amount of ego in memory, and also that when we catch up with these people, this affair, something has gone very, very wrong. So there's sort of this other layer then. So when they're remembering that narrative, you know, they might have a reason to remember themselves as the hero as opposed to the other. But also just that when people remember, a lot of times the way that we play with this kind of information is like, depending on how stressful the situation was, that's how radically different their memories become. Because we've read all these sort of interesting eyewitness accounts where, you know, I mean, they're crazy actually, how eyewitnesses remember things that, you know, they've been caught on camera as absolutely not happening. But the eyewitness will swear up and down, you know, somebody pulled a gun, I saw him handcuffed, I saw him run away, whatever. And then they'll show you the crime and it looked nothing like that. But the person was under a tremendous amount of stress. And somehow in their brain, this got connected to a memory that they had or an expectation they had about the situation. And it all formed a narrative. And that's what they literally remember. So I don't know, we had a lot of fun with it. You know, I think we approached each situation a little differently. But back to your question, that yes, we had sort of this kind of central narrative going throughout the season, and then it was just about sort of fracturing it as we went along.
That central couple in the story is played by Dominic West and Ruth Wilson. Those two who are, cheating on their respective spouses. What was that casting process, for those two roles like? Did you have either of them in mind from the beginning?
Yeah, I had him in mind from the beginning. Mostly just because I love him, because I think he's such a brilliant actor, and he is a brilliant actor. So that was pretty easy. You know, we wrote the part, we offered it to him. He said no first, and then he said yes, and that was awesome. And then with her, it was much more difficult actually, because, and I think this sort of speaks to gender and expectations in terms of the kind of pressure that we put on our female actresses sometimes, but nobody could agree on who would be the right person for that part, because you wanted that character to be a couple different things. You wanted her to be sort of hot enough to quote unquote leave your wife. That got bandied around a lot. Like, would I leave my wife for her? Would I leave my wife for her? Because that's integral to the story. But then I wanted the character to also be able to play this unbelievably deep sense of grief, and the character's mother, and I wanted women to be able to identify with her, not just feel like she was sort of a quote unquote homewrecker. And honestly, like, everybody that we saw initially either felt like one or the other in terms of type. And then we found Ruth, and it was like, yeah, she can do both. Somehow she can do both. So that was really exciting. I think that she was about to break one way or the other, and we just sort of got lucky that we attached her to the show before she signed up for something else, because she's going to be a huge star.
Once you have those roles cast, I mean, you have this story and you have these characters in mind, but does anything, change your approach once you have like those actors in place and you see what they're bringing to the roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what television is about. I think that's why television is very different from other mediums, is because it really is a dance between the actor and the writer. And I started on In Treatment, which was this little show on HBO, which was just these characters on a couch talking. And the way that show worked, there was one writer per actor. So you basically, as the writer, really got in there with the actor. And I wrote all the young people. So it was about really kind of getting to know those people and then figuring out sort of the way they talk and the way they think and writing towards that character. And it's just a character on the couch talking. So you really could meld the actor and the character. But I guess that was sort of like my training or something. So that's what that's how I work. And so I really do try to sort of identify the essence of the actor and write towards it. I have kind of a theory about writing for television, which is that if you write towards the sort of humanity of your actors, whatever it may be, then the character becomes sort of expansive. It just keeps growing and growing. Then they can sort of kind of play more and more. And if you write sort of against their essence, then I think no matter how well you write, the character gets quite limited. Because you feel the kind of like actor struggling, to work against the part. It's just not, I mean, not to say that actors are wonderful and they're brilliant and they can play anything, but there's an essence to them. Like there's an essence to a writer, there's an essence to any kind of artist. And that's where, I think that's where like the universal comes from. It's like kind of figuring out like what type they are, what myth they represent, what kind of archetype anyway, I can go on about it for a while.
You mentioned getting Ruth Wilson before she broke out, and of course you did that in a big way on In Treatment. You mentioned you wrote for the young characters, and after In Treatment they all kind of blew up. Mia Wasikowska, Alison Pill, and Dane DeHaan.
I know.
Were those episodes written and then they came on, or did you actually have a chance to write for them over the course of the season, like for their sensibility as actors?
No, totally wrote for their sensibilities. That was the great thing about it, because there was so much writing in Treatment. There was 9 episodes a season at the beginning. So so you just basically developed week by week, and it was great because the script would go out and then we did a lot of rehearsal on In Treatment. It was like staging sort of little plays, and those actors were so, I mean, I don't know how, we just got really lucky. I mean, Mia was like off the boat from Australia. She'd never done anything. And then Alice and I had known actually from theater in New York, and I was kind of like, this is our girl. And she won a Tony when she was like 17. She's extraordinary. And then Dane was also a theater actor that I sort of knew from circles in New York, who had also, I think he'd just come from the North Carolina School of the Arts. So yeah, it was really exciting. It was it was nice to be sort of part of their early journey. And they're still actually, all 3 of them, very good friends, because I think there was something really intensive about that experience that kind of bonded everyone together.
Yeah, it does seem like, In Treatment was a very kind of, in a way, a very writer and actor driven show. I mean, like you mentioned, it's like writing, or at least like watching a play and basically 2 or 3 character plays every episode. Was that like paradise for a writer, or was that, kind of storytelling format more challenging in some ways?
No, it was totally paradise for a writer. I mean, it was my first job in television, so I didn't know quite how good I had it at that point. I thought, oh, good, like television, amazing. It's just like writing plays, except you get paid. But yeah, it was sort of a singular experience. I don't know. It was wonderful, actually.
The shows you've worked on over the course of your career, like also House of Cards and in between In Treatment and The Affair, they're not just different stylistically, but just basically the foundational narrative structure of them, and is so different from one to the other. Is that something that appeals to you as a writer, to taking on such a broad spectrum of ways of telling a story?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I mean, I think. I think that it's interesting, like especially for TV, because there's so much material that you end up writing for television. The format is really important, and format can be kind of a dirty word. Nobody likes to talk about it because it feels like sort of like a package, or it feels like something sort of commercial. But if you have a strong format, then you can play within it. And then you're sort of, your creativity can kind of explode because the form keeps you sort of safe and it keeps you strong. And I think when the show is sort of loose and formless, that's when I think the writers get into a little bit of trouble because it kind of can go anywhere, so it does go anywhere, and you sort of lose the organizing principle of the show. And then you sort of forget what you're writing about. You sort of forget why you're doing it. Like you don't have a sense of what the point is. So the nice thing about all three of those shows is that about In Treatment and House of Cards and Now the Affair, is that the purpose of the show is so kind of embedded in the form that it makes the writing process really clear in a lot of ways, very kind of makes it easy in some respects.
And one of the things about the affair now, that format is so strong and clear in each episode, the two points of view. But does it also get complicated in certain ways, like just logistically, like you're dealing with scheduling and continuity, with trying to tell sort of two sides of the same story every episode?
Yeah, it's really complicated. It's a headache. And last year we block shot. We shot 2 episodes at once, and then we realized that that's basically like shooting 4 episodes at once because every episode is 2-sided, and it requires costume changes, makeup changes, set changes. So it's kind of a nightmare. I mean, it's been a really steep learning curve, and we rely really heavily on the crew to kind of keep up with it, and all the department heads. And honestly, I rely really heavily on the department heads to be very creative. And like, of course, department heads are always very creative, but I want them to kind of get on board with the storytelling, and then I want them to sort of bring their own ideas in terms of how we're changing looks, how we're changing production. It's like everybody has to participate in the idea of the dual perspectives. We rely really heavily on everyone. So it's good. I mean, I think that the show can get very exhausting to work on for that reason, because you can never kind of relax and just be like, oh, well, this is the house we're in for, the next 2 weeks. So what, it's like, well, this is the house we're in for like today. And then tomorrow this all has to change. But I know it also bonds people, makes everybody kind of excited to keep thinking.
The show so much around the title affair happened in season 1. Most of the people involved found out about the affair, and then of course there is that murder mystery in the future. How far ahead did you plan this story when you first pitched it, or is that something you're taking season by season?
No, we planned it pretty far ahead. We had 3 seasons when we pitched it, with kind of an idea of what a potential 4th season could look like. And we went into Showtime with, all 3 seasons kind of beat it out. And it got less specific as we went on. The first season was very beat it out, and the second season a little less so, and the third season was like, but we had a real idea of where we wanted to begin and end the show. And we've always said that that like the first season is the sin, and the third season is the cost, the price. So we've been playing a long game for a long time. And in some ways that's been good, actually. I mean, it's made the breaking of the show, like we broke the second season really quickly, I think. I mean, we're still breaking it, but it's been an incredibly enjoyable experience in the room this year, because I think we had a very clear idea of like where the season needed to go. And in some ways it's been a little hamstrung, because we've sort of boxed ourselves into some corners that I wish we hadn't, if we hadn't been thinking that far forward, if we didn't have to have made decisions in season 1 that are going to influence season 3. But like I said, that's sort of where the ingenuity comes from. Unfortunately, I've said, these are the given circumstances that we established in season 1. We can't change them now. So basically, how do we adapt the narrative to make it work? And then everybody has to come up with something. And usually what you come up with is kind of brilliant, but also feels like it was planned from the very beginning, even if it wasn't. So I don't know. It's been cool. I mean, it's been, like I said, the show's been like a major learning experience, major learning curve for I think everybody involved. But it feels good to feel like we're doing it. It's working.
Without giving, away specifics about how you're going to try and, get out of, certain corners you got yourself into, are there any particulars that you could talk about that events in season one where you realized, oh, you're going to have to, work to get out of this, or a position that like, oh, now we're going to have to figure this out, like that?
Okay, so let me think. Let me try to think about this in a way that haven't yet been revealed. Well, we know Scott Lockhart is dead. And we had an idea of how he died from the beginning, and that was in the first season. But there's some given circumstances that we established in the first season that I now realize that we have to work a little harder to get ourselves back to when we get to his actual death. So I don't know if I can give away anything more than that, because I think then I'm going to jump the gun. But there were definitely moments in the room where, like, we would be sort of breaking what happened that night. And somebody would be like, oh, and then this can happen, and I was like, yes, exactly, put it on the board, and then somebody would be like, didn't we already say that? And I was like, okay, never mind, like, take it off the board. So there was a little bit of mental gymnastics involved in that. But actually, I love what we came up with in the end, and I don't think the audience is ever going to see it coming. But it feels also like when you sort of look back on it in retrospect, I think you're going to realize that it actually has been embedded since the beginning of the show.
Another noteworthy aspect of the show, is the main title theme music, which is written and performed by one of my personal favorite artists, Fiona Apple. And it sort of encapsulates the themes of the show, the ripple effects we have on each other's lives. And you tell me about that song and having it sort of set the tone for the show.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Fiona Apple is also one of my favorite artists in the world forever and ever. And she is my husband's best friend's client. So I had this like sort of roundabout connection to her. And I wrote her this very long letter about how much her music had meant to me, and how I thought that we needed somebody with her kind of depth of emotion and her kind of core of grief, honestly, to write our theme song. And somehow she agreed to do it. She saw the pilot. She really loved the pilot. Maybe she'd only read the pilot at that point. I don't remember. Anyway, so that was it. So she was like, okay, yes. And I was like, okay, great. And then we just basically waited. You don't influence her process. You don't give her notes. She's got her own crazy magic going on. And then so we just sort of sat around and waited. And then all of a sudden this song just kind of appeared out of nowhere. And it was amazing. That's actually, to this day, that is one of the things in the world that I'm most proud of, is somehow convincing Fiona Apple to write a song for my show. It was cool. It was really cool.
I had a chance recently to, a few weeks ago, to talk to Maura Tierney, who plays Dominic West's wife on the show, and she mentioned that we'd actually be seeing, some of the, story from her point of view in coming season. Had you always planned on exploring other characters' perspectives beyond the two leads?
It's a really good question. Actually, no, we hadn't. But it felt necessary at the end of season one, because because Maura and Josh were so strong. And you could just feel, I could feel it as an audience member with absolutely no objectivity, but I was like, I want to see inside these people's heads. And then the feedback that everybody was getting was like more of them. And it just felt, I think honestly, at this point, I don't quite remember. I think maybe we had talked about fracturing the storylines further in subsequent seasons, but we'd also talked about just keeping it split between the two. But then it just felt like a really natural outgrowth of the first season. I don't think we would want to kind of keep fracturing forever. So the show just became this kind of weird prism of perspectives, like all over. But to get Maura and Josh's, to get Helen and Cole's perspective in there this year, it just felt really right, and it's opened the show out in all sorts of ways. It's given the show this kind of breadth and also this breathing room, and it's cool because now the way we're telling the narrative, it doesn't I don't know, maybe I shouldn't tell you. Never mind, I won't tell you. Anyway, cool, really cool.
Earlier this year, the show won 2 Golden Globes, Best Drama Series and Best Drama Actress for Ruth Wilson. And at that point, that was in January, and the show had just ended the first season in December. By now, have you had a chance to process all that, sort of immediate attention and that whirlwind that came about like so soon after the show premiered?
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, I mean, it was really nice. It was wonderful. But you just got to get back to work. And it's really great to be recognized. I'm very happy for my cast. I'm very happy for my relationship with Showtime. But it's like I think the first season's kind of the tip of the iceberg, and we have a lot more story that we want to tell. And so I just hope that we can, I don't want to sound like Pollyanna-ish about it, because I really do like having Golden Globe, but I just really hope that we can keep it up. I want us to get better. I want the second season to be better than the first. I want the third season to be better than the second. I want us to keep kind of diving deeper into these characters. I want our storytelling to get more complex. I want people to say that the show keeps getting better. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that is the amazing thing about working with this group of actors, is I think that they feel the same way. There's no lazy actors in this bunch. Nobody rests on their laurels. And so everybody kind of keeps coming to work and is like, okay, how can we make this better, truer, deeper, more complicated, more shocking, more tragic, funny, or whatever. I think that in any kind of art form, you better be doing it for the love of it, because it's just too much time. It's too much energy, and it's too much time away from your family, and it's too exhausting to be doing it, because you want, to be celebrated for it. But that said, I mean, I think that Golden Globe helped us out quite a bit in terms of getting us in front of people's eyeballs and legitimizing the show in a way that I was worried about, how it would be received. So I don't know. We'll see.
Did it sort of embolden you or give you and the cast and crew confidence that there's a lot of story left to go, but you're on the right track, and sort of keep on on the track you're on?
Yeah, I think so. I think if anything, it relaxed everybody a bit. And I think that I can't really speak for anybody else's process. I can only speak for myself as a writer. But I read the first 2 scripts for the second season, and I could tell that I was relaxed in the writing, and everybody was sort of responding to it. They were just like, it feels like the show has kind of sort of dropped into its grace point. And I think in the beginning of a new show, you're so you want to please everybody, or I did. There were many, many different ideas about how the show could possibly work. I had a lot of really talented actors suddenly at my disposal, and I had a lot of money, and I had a lot of I had a network that I really wanted to satisfy. And so there was a lot of trying to kind of please everybody, which is not really the way to run a television show. And I think probably if you would talk to anybody else about my show running style, they would be like, that's insane. You're not, you're an asshole. You're not trying to please anybody. You should try harder to please us. But I was very much feeling the pressure. And so I felt like I had to get a lot of things in all the time. I never wanted the episodes to slow down. I always wanted to, I was really kind of concerned with the drama and the shock and whatever. And this year I have much more of a sense of you know what? We got a story to tell. I trust the story. I trust these actors. I trust my writing, trust the directors, and we can give it some time to breathe, which I think is actually where the show works better anyway. I think the show deserves a little bit of room. And actually, we had sort of this interesting experience when we were cutting episode 9, which was the sort of big meltdown episode with Ruth. And the episode was going over. And so we were that's a term, they call it frame fucking, where you have to sort of cut out. Yeah, it's funny term. You have to kind of cut out frames to get under 60 minutes. And so we frame fucked the episode, and we got under 60 minutes, and then we watched it again, and we were just actually losing that 60 seconds, just a couple frames here, a couple frames there, a couple frames there, kind of ruined the episode. The episode needed time. It just needed that extra bit of breathing room, for things to land. And that was sort of an interesting lesson for us, because we ended up having to go to Showtime and basically petition them and be like, please let us keep this episode a little over because we don't think it works under. But the show sort of demands a bit of space. So this year we're sort of giving the show that when it needs to, and then also sometimes we have these episodes that are actually much more crazy than anything that I conceived of writing last year, because we feel like the show can also sort of afford that. So sometimes we have these like episodes, we have a couple episodes that just go at breakneck paces, and then the next episode will calm itself down, and so there's this kind of undulation of the rhythm of the show, which I really like.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the affair, on the Golden Globes, and on the second season coming up. It was great talking to you today.
Okay, thanks so much. You too.